Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Let's go over our agenda for this morning. I've personally been in the AV industry for 20 years, and I'm sure you all have interacted with corporate audiovisual or collaboration technologies in your lifetime and have found some frustrations, us too. Over the next 30 minutes, you'll learn what we understand to be some of the reasons why there's been so much pain around AV traditionally, and some new ways to address that pain. Our speaker will be covering our changing digital landscape, how that applies to corporate meeting spaces, and some ways you can deal with it. We hope you'll walk away with a new perspective on a way to manage multiple disparate technologies, lower your total cost of ownership, and make meetings easier and more productive. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Bob Sharp. Bob has over 30 years in tech. Starting out as a professional photog in England, Bob has always been able to see the big picture. I've worked with him for several years while he was an executive at SVSI, one of the pioneers in AV over IP. Now, Bob is the Vice President of Global Business Development for Uteligy. He will be walking us through the agenda for about 30 minutes, and we'd love to hear from you too. So if you have any comments or questions as we go along, please type them in the chat window, and we'll address them in our Q&A at the end. And with that, take it away, Bob.
Well, thank you so much, and I do appreciate you spending this time with us. Your time is obviously valuable, and it is appreciated. We all know that over the past few years, there's been significant changes in our world. We have companies like eBay, one of the largest retailers in the world that owns no inventory, and Airbnb, largest hotel chain in the world that owns no real estate. And we're all familiar with Uber, no cars, and Facebook, largest media company probably in the world, but they own no content. And that sort of change is going through in our AV and UC world as well. One of the most significant changes that I've seen in the past few years is the move from companies having a few large, complex conference rooms to having maybe even hundreds of small meeting spaces. And huddle room has become a lexicon in our industry now, and we all know what that is. There's also an extensive use now of software codecs, Zoom, Skype, WebEx, etc., rather than a dependence on hardware, on Cisco, Polycom codecs, hardware codecs. Global collaboration is more commonplace these days than it was before. And I think also there's a sort of instant gratification. IT is becoming increasingly responsible for AV. I'm sure we all have seen that. And I think, interestingly enough, there's a lot more appetite now in the corporate world, in the enterprise world, for an OpEx model rather than CapEx consumption. And, you see that trend where buildings are not necessarily now owned by the enterprise, they're leased, they lease their IT infrastructure, they outsource many functions within the company. So I think there is a move away from this feeling of we do a project with a 4-year refresh, we do the conference rooms, we install the equipment, everything, we get everything signed off on, and we kind of walk away, and then 4 years down the road there's going to be a refresh. I think companies want to be a lot more flexible and to be able to consume AV in an OpEx model where they can be a lot more flexible in adding more rooms, downsizing, upsizing, etc. And of course, a concern that IT has is the speed of change of technology. They don't want to find themselves 3-4 years down the road with obsolete technology. Our world is now connected. We move from our home to our car to our office. We expect a consistency of connectivity and communications. And examples of that, of course, are Office 365 and Zoom and Skype. And very, I think, interestingly, Apple CarPlay. Apple takes the concept of the interface and your personal preferred UI moving with you from your home, your phone, to your car, and to your office. But of course, we know that traditional AV in meeting rooms really doesn't fit in with that. You know, the traditional Extron, Crestron, AMX control panel really doesn't fit into the app, the phone type of interface. And in fact, the company, as Victoria mentioned, I was with before, SVSI, and we were bought by Harman. And Harman and Samsung are really pushing this sort of connectivity between home, car, and office. In the enterprise environment, one thing we found was that the initial cost of just the technology, you know, the purchase of equipment, the installation, represents only about 30% of the total cost of ownership during the life cycle of that hardware and that deployment. So therefore, to reduce cost, the challenge is to reduce the other 70%, the ongoing cost of ownership. We believe that this can be achieved in a fairly significant way by delivering a control, monitoring, management, analytics overlay to the software deployment. That can provide information and reduce service time, reduce fault resolution time, and improve efficiency. Nutelegy's uniqueness is to be completely hardware and platform agnostic. An open architecture, very secure standard software system. And I think that sort of hardware agnosticity is very meaningful when you're trying to look at managing, monitoring a very disparate suite of hardware products from different vendors. And certainly when you look at a global deployment, you know, local equipment that may be in use in, you know, China that's not sold in the US, and that type of, you know, problems that can cause for you. So how can we reduce this 70% of cost? Well, I think the key is data and analytics. What are the top 5 things you perhaps should know about your AV UC deployment? Number 1 is device status. I've got several hundred, maybe several thousand conference rooms, meeting spaces, huddle rooms, lecture halls, teaching spaces deployed, potentially deployed globally. Number 1 thing I need to know is everything in those rooms powered up, online, and working. What assets do we actually own? You know, devices, rooms, and in our devices, rooms, and spaces. We find that when we talk to IT managers who are now responsible for AV, they literally do not know what equipment they have in all the different meeting spaces. It was installed by multiple different integrators, purchased from multiple different hardware vendors, and they just don't know what they have. Where are they physically located? And very importantly now, I think device usage statistics are going to be huge in reducing cost and improving efficiency as we look at AV and UC. I can give a sort of an anecdote of that many years ago, as you all know, there was a huge push to put smart boards into every kid's classroom from kindergarten through 12th grade. And being somewhat of a cynic, I often thought, you know, do those smart boards ever make kids smarter? And my own kind of feeling was perhaps not, but there's no way of knowing unless you can gather information on how often is it used, has that per day, has that usage declined or increased over a period of time? Has it made any impact on student outcome? All of these questions can be derived from big data. If I can collect that kind of information from an entire school district, then I can make decisions and make informed decisions based on that analytics. And that, I think, is true in AV. We're looking at, are we using more software codecs than hardware codecs? Are people in our meeting spaces using more wireless presentation, and therefore do we need an in-room matrix switcher in all of our rooms? Maybe only some rooms need a matrix switcher. But the key to data is collecting a lot of it to allow analytics to do their job. When we're troubleshooting, when we get the panic call, nothing's working in the conference room, we need to know immediately and quickly, is it the network that's causing a problem? Is it hardware failure? Or, and quite often as we know it is it user error? So, what's the challenge for a user experience in today's more dynamic meeting collaboration environment? Well, let's face it, often now trying to connect immediately with colleagues, impromptu or even a scheduled meeting where they may be in their home, their cars, or offices anywhere in the world can be very challenging. Sometimes it just does not work and creates a lot of frustration on everybody's behalf. So what are the options? Well, one is, of course, on a local level, you could simply increase the support staff, have more people on hand to, rush around and make sure everything's working and be very responsive. But that's very cost prohibitive. Is it user error? Is it a specific piece of hardware that's causing us problems? And should we get rid of that and use something else? But, we don't know. If we're not being able to collect that data on a larger scale across multiple rooms, it's going to be an informed guess rather than hard fact. We know there's increased demand for collaboration technology. But what technology? What is being favored, used? What is more efficient? What is more reliable? And again, that all comes down to data. What are the statistics on our downtime? Is it, a huge amount of downtime? Is it one or two rooms? Is it, specific hardware, etc.? Video conferencing is getting very confusing. We all seem to have to now have multiple software clients on our laptops and phones in order to, have our meetings. And that really, on an enterprise level, is not terribly efficient. And maybe we should, again, look at standardizing on a specific software codec. We've done a lot of research over the years, and I'm trying to find out, what do end users want from their AV experience? What's their expectation? Well, from the customer side, from the end user side, one of the big frustrations is if I've got a large deployment, particularly now we're talking these huddle spaces, and I have to swap out a screen in a room, and I've got to perhaps substitute a later model, the original one's obsolete, or I'm going to swap brands because I'm getting a better price or deal. I have to then bring in the AV programmer to recode the control system to work with the new piece of equipment. We know, we're terribly familiar with that, but I promise you, our end users, our customers, they just don't get it. They do not understand why it is so complex to update the control code. With a hardware agnostic control management software solution that's based on configuration rather than bespoke programming, it works on a system of drivers. So if you simply substitute, and you can do this remotely, just as software, if you can substitute the Samsung driver for an LG driver, the control logic doesn't change. It's just the translation through the driver that changes, and the control system will work seamlessly with the new display simply by substituting the appropriate driver. Consistent user interface is becoming huge. As corporates and enterprises, they don't want their staff, employees to go from room to room or building to building and be faced with an unfamiliar control UI on the touchscreen in the meeting rooms. Let's face it, we have all been in meeting rooms where there's a cheat sheet, taped next to the press-drawn control panel to tell you how to use it. And that's really no longer acceptable. And I think the prevalence of phone apps is interesting in this, because I've got a friend who's a phone app developer, and he's told me that they believe they have no more than 75 seconds after a customer downloads a commercial app like, the Hilton app or Delta app or whatever it might be. If the customer can't navigate quickly and familiarly through that app, they will uninstall it. So I think we need to look at our interfaces to be a lot more consistent across our enterprises, more familiar to the way people are used to working now with their phone apps. And again, if you have a sort of central server concept to control, you can simply update, change, and have consistency of the interfaces, because it's simply a push from the server to all the control panels in the meeting spaces. Also now, it's not just AV devices that we need to look at bringing into our analytics and our management and control. We're looking at the Internet of Things. We've got occupancy sensors. We've got temperature sensors. We've got HVAC controls, lighting controls. And in a smart building, and more we're seeing facilities managers of smart buildings wanting to bring AV into that arena of smart building management, bringing these sort of IoT devices into our AV world from the perspective of management, control, and analytics is becoming very, very increasingly important. Huge, again, is real-time support. When we are dealing with multiple conference rooms and spaces, the panic call because the big meeting has started and the DSP's not responding, no audio or no video. And it's always typically reactive, not proactive. I don't know that conference room 1 is not functioning until someone goes in to use it. If I could get alerts, proactive alerts, real-time alerts from my entire global deployment of AV in a dashboard, some fashion that said, these are the rooms that are generating alerts, I can be proactive in responding to that. I can be, and if I can actually connect into that room remotely and drill down to a specific device that is offline or causing problems, I may even be able to fix it remotely. I could reboot it. I could look if a configuration is wrong, like the displays somehow got on an HDMI 2 instead of HDMI 1, and my techs can do this remotely without having to do a service call. So in Utelogy, in a very familiar fashion to IT has done for years with monitoring programs such as SolarWinds, we provide a dashboard hosted in a cloud, so it's obviously can be accessed from anywhere and on any device. And these dashboards are pages that, of course, allow a user to configure a view of data from their global deployment. And that includes customizable real-time alerts. How many rooms have I got? How many rooms are in use? What rooms are generating errors? Device usage reports, asset management. I can actually, because we are collecting information, data from these devices every 5 seconds, we also can create an asset management database in the cloud that you can attach documentation to. So if I find there's a piece of equipment in, a conference room in Tokyo that's is not working, I can look it up and say who installed it, is it still under warranty, who is who's responsible for it, where's the people to call to come fix it. That's all available to me in my cloud. So conference rooms can be obviously complex or simple. And we've talked a fair bit about the sort of hardware agnosticity that is important when you're looking at monitoring, management, and control. Because if we look at this conference room, and every device may as well be sourced from a different manufacturer. The audio systems from Biam, the display is Samsung, you know what I'm saying. So if we are trying to troubleshoot this, whether locally or remotely, the challenge is we have to have a technician that is, can get into each device and try and troubleshoot it. And if we're generating alerts, and we've got a conference room that is not functioning because of an issue with the audio system, if we don't know that's the problem until we go in there, we're going in blind. How do we fix this? How do we work it? Well, through Utelligy, our uConsole remote real-time access application, technicians can remotely control, test, and troubleshoot devices in any room in a Utelligy deployment if they can connect into the on-premise server securely through VPN or TeamViewer or a means that the IT people are happy with. So with Utelligy, because it is hardware agnostic, you only need one console to be able to look at any of the devices in the room. So here, you can see in this one, we've got a matrix, Extron matrix switcher, we've got Vardio cameras, Shure microphones, Symmetrix DSP, and we've got a codec. So if we can use this single console, and we can then actually test remotely each function of each device, even the functions that are not exposed in the in-room UI, but we can actually test whether, we can pan left, pan right on the camera, etc. But you can do that remotely. This is huge in terms of cost, efficiency, and being proactive. Because if we go back to that dashboard, you're getting proactive alerts that say, in that conference room, the audio system is erroring. It's reporting errors. Then the technician can go in through this console and can actually say, drill down literally globally to a room, to a device, and it could be anywhere in the country, anywhere on the planet, and actually real-time test the devices and see the response feedback from that device in real time. So this is one of the big reasons that we are so, what we believe this hardware agnosticity is important, because if you look at a large deployment, there's no way, it's all going to be one manufacturer's hardware. It's simply not. So again, it simplifies and speeds up the ability for technicians to be responsive, and efficiency, get your rooms up and running again. I think something else that we need to be very aware of, and this is a sort of little bit of a wrap up before we go into the Q&A portion of this, is that in AV now, there are a lot more stakeholders than there used to be, particularly because of networking. More and more, our devices are going to be on the network in some fashion or another, whether for actual streaming, audio, video, or for control management. So we've got the IT department, and I know this, my history back in the day with SVSI, we were the pioneers of video over IP, and we had to get over the not on my network response that we always got from IT. So we had to be able to, talk IT. We had to understand their concerns. We had to understand their their security issues, their how they manage a server installation, are they virtualizing servers, all this sort of, they're a stakeholder. The board is, you know, it's cost, it's efficiency, it's good use of real estate. Real estate in major metropolitan areas is a huge, huge cost. And if you've got, let's say, a conference room in your Tokyo HQ, and you've got statistics that say it's only used, twice a week, whereas the other three conference rooms are constantly in use, you want to know, why is that conference room not being used? It may be outdated equipment. It may be it's the furthest from the coffee machine. You just don't know because you're not getting usage statistics. And if we can provide, the financial people with these statistics of usage and good, effective use of their real estate, it saves millions and millions of dollars. HR is involved. Retaining staff, particularly in technology companies, enterprises, is huge for them. And if they feel that, their employees are frustrated and aggravated by outdated technology, inefficient technology, difficulty in having collaborative calls, and they're going to lose their staff. They're going to go somewhere where the experience is better. And in an era of pretty well full employment, that's a big concern to them. And of course, we now have facilities, because as I mentioned, the trend is for companies not to own their own real estate, and facilities managers of leased buildings are increasingly interested in how they can add value to their tenants. And they already do, obviously, environmental management, light, heat, AC, etc., security systems, occupancy, etc. If they're more and more interested in adding AV into that suite of facility management as a value proposition to their customers. So that just about wraps it up time-wise for my bit. We do have time for some questions, so I'm going to thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. I know it's valuable. And obviously do reach out to Victoria if you want any further information on anything that Netrix offers, or of course the Utility platform, please do. And now I'll ask her to see if there's any questions we can field.
Thank you for that, Bob. So I've been monitoring the chat. We don't have a whole lot, but we do have a couple questions. One of them is, with all my AV devices on my network to be managed and monitored and controlled by Utility, how do you address security concerns with that?
Sure. Well, job one is that the actual piece of server software that we're installing on premise has been fully vetted and scoped for any security vulnerability. And we have used third-party companies to, vet our software for security concerns. When you're looking at simply monitoring and controlling a device, of course, you're not actually looking at audio streams, video streams. You're simply sending control code out, and it can be encrypted, of course. But it's not as severe an issue in security concerns as it is with actual video audio streaming, which of course has to be fully encrypted and in order to be secure. But from our perspective, our main issue is that our software has been fully vetted for any vulnerability on a server network, and that's how we've dealt with that.
All right. Good stuff. And then another question we got. So these cloud-based dashboards with data, what resistance have you faced in deploying cloud-based software, and how have you managed that?
Yeah, well, we're not, the way Uteligy works is a sort of a hybrid. So the actual sort of control and data gathering is done on premise via a piece of server software that's deployed on premise, as any other server application is in an environment. And then the cloud side is simply an outbound connection to Microsoft Azure. And we chose Azure because, of course, it's very well known. It hosts Skype, it hosts Office 365, so there's a lot less resistance to a Microsoft Azure than a sort of homegrown cloud platform. But the way Uteligy works, it is outbound only. So we're simply passing data, raw data, up to the cloud. We're not allowing any ingress from the cloud side to the server, where that would introduce a vulnerability. We do still, there are still companies, and particularly banks, and obviously government, military, etc., who are very, very risk adverse to anything cloud. Although it is changing, it just is. But they are very risk adverse, and we do have an option for them to host the cloud portion of the Uteligy platform, to host that themselves.
Great. Well, that ends our Q&A and the webinar also. This webinar has been recorded, and we can send out a link if you guys want to watch it or share with your colleagues. Thank you again, everyone, for your time. We appreciate you joining us today. And again, if there's any questions, you want to see a demo, or if you want more information, please feel free to reach out to me. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.